In a surprising move, China has officially integrated its digital yuan into the cross-border payment systems of 10 ASEAN nations and 6 Middle Eastern countries. This development has rattled global financial markets, as it allows over 38% of the world's trade volume to bypass the US-dominated SWIFT system for the first time. China's objectives are clear: build a financial network independent from the West and encourage widespread use of the yuan, reducing exposure to US dollar volatility and sanctions. The timing was no coincidence. It came immediately after President Trump's fresh tariffs, serving as a strategic counter-strike. In 2022, China-ASEAN trade soared to $975 billion, a 120% increase since 2013, making ASEAN China's top trading partner. With the digital yuan now embedded in regional trade, a shift away from the US dollar could be underway. Meanwhile, China's $2.6 billion investment in ASML lithography equipment in 2023 is now worthless. The US pressured the Dutch government to revoke export licenses, effectively bricking $15 billion worth of machinery in China. In response, Beijing is cutting ties with ASML and Taiwan's TSMC, pledging to build a self-sufficient chip industry. China's plan wasn't reactionary. Since 2022, it has invested over $75 billion into its semiconductor sector, recruiting 50,000 engineers and repatriating talent. The result? In just 3 years, China has developed a localized chip supply chain using 60 to 70% domestically made equipment. Shenzhen-based Seikar claims its own DUV lithography tech can now produce chips below 7 nanometers. The Huawei-made 60 Pro's 7 nanometers chip shocked the industry, and SMIC is already testing 5 nanometers chips with 3 nanometers in sight. China's leap forward has consequences. ASML's revenue dropped 27% in Q4 2024. The chip war has expanded into a broader financial front, with China dumping US bonds and pulling out of key tech stocks like Apple and Nvidia. This could lead to rising mortgage rates, tanking tech stocks, and vanishing retirement savings, turning the chip war into a currency war that affects everyday Americans. Now holding nearly 20% of global market share, up from just 5% in 2020, SMIC exemplifies China's rapid ascent. The era of Silicon Valley dominance is fading as Dragon Valley rises. With a growing stake in the world's tech, China isn't just making chips, it's rewriting the rules. Following Trump's threat of a 50% tariff on Chinese goods unless China cancels its 34% tariff, Beijing responded with defiance. It could retaliate by raising tariffs on US goods, especially high-tech products, by 10 to 20%. Previously, China imposed tariffs worth up to $60 billion. That number could surpass $100 billion if tensions escalate. Beyond tariffs, China controls 60 to 70% of the global rare earth supply, critical for electronics. If exports are restricted, it could paralyze US tech manufacturing. Beijing has used this leverage before, and doing so again could raise global production costs. China might also use non-tariff measures like stricter customs checks, causing delays and increasing costs for US businesses. Additionally, it could devalue the yuan by 5 to 10% to boost exports and offset US tariffs. China is already reducing reliance on the US by growing trade through the Belt and Road Initiative in ASEAN, with exports to these regions up by 15 to 20%. Diplomatically, China is strengthening ties with Russia, ASEAN, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to gain global influence and diversify trade partnerships. The US economy is feeling the strain. In one day, the stock market dropped over 700 points, signaling a collapse. Even Fox News, once loyal to Trump, can no longer hide the truth. With rural unemployment rising and consumer confidence at record lows, Trump's economic image is crumbling. Longtime supporters are expressing regret as they face higher costs, job insecurity, and social cuts. Former Trump strongholds like West Virginia are seeing federal job losses and rising anger. Protests are erupting, accusing Trump of betraying his base. With tax breaks for billionaires and cuts to veteran and Medicaid benefits, many feel abandoned. "We voted for him for America first, but now it's billionaires first," a protester said. Trump's foreign policy has fared no better. Close ally J.D. Vance was detained in Greenland, Canada has backed away from U.S. energy ties, and China is courting former U.S. allies. A major intelligence leak via Signal further damaged the administration, involving top officials. With even Fox News turning critical, Trump's silence has deepened public distrust. Meanwhile, Trump has now threatened a 200% tariff on European wines and champagnes, responding to a 50% EU tariff on whiskey. As global trade tensions intensify, everyday consumers could soon face higher prices not just on tech, but even on their favorite bottle of wine. We can reach this market even if we are suffering from a 200% tariff. After Trump's threat to impose 200% tariffs, the European Union responded firmly. Senior officials from the EU declared that Europe would not give up its wine industry and would protect these products against any threats from the US. The EU asserted that it would not concede in this confrontation and was ready to defend its national interests. The European Union strongly criticized President Trump's trade policies, arguing that the 200% tariff on wine and champagne would not only hurt the industry but also damage the trade relationship between the US and the EU. French wine producers, especially premium brands like Champagne, will face great difficulties as high tariffs push up the cost of their products. France has spoken out to protect the interests of its wine industry and is prepared to face any retaliatory measures from the US. However, this confrontation creates opportunities for US wine producers. If the EU indeed imposes 200% tariffs on imported wine, US winemakers could expand into the EU market, especially if the US reduces tariffs on domestic wine. This could be a huge boost for the US wine industry, allowing them to build and expand their market in countries that are already familiar with European wine brands. If the EU continues to maintain its tariff rates and refuses to yield, the wine industry in these countries will certainly face a significant decline in revenue in the US. At the same time, US wine producers will have the opportunity to expand their market share in EU countries if tariffs on domestic wine products, especially California or Texas wine brands, are reduced. The trade war between the US and the EU is entering a phase of unprecedented tension. How will the EU respond? And can the US seize this opportunity to expand its wine market in Europe? Don't look away, because the next developments in this tariff war will surprise you. Will a Liberation Day through global tariffs truly free America? Or will it drag the economy into a crisis, along with fierce resistance from none other than Canada? From Ottawa, Canada won't stay silent. Canadians need a fighter to stand up to the president. From the capital, a strong message echoed, grabbing Washington's attention. Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England and a leading candidate for Prime Minister of Canada, has made it clear he will reject any attempts to weaken Canada. He emphasized that an economy is only strong when it serves society, when people are not left behind. That, according to Carney, was already the reality for far too many Canadians even before President Trump's policies. And unless Canada acts, that number will only grow. Carney also revealed that he has directly spoken with the US president and made one thing clear: I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada. All attempts to wear us down, to break us down so that America can own. What makes Carney a liberal is also what makes global tariffs a high-risk gamble. In the first 2 months of his term, the US president has doubled the amount of imported goods under tariffs, pushing the total to over $1 trillion. However, the plan currently under consideration is far more ambitious: a universal 20% tariff on all countries exporting to the US. If implemented, this would directly impact over $3 trillion worth of goods. But with scale comes significant risk. Analysts at Moody's are warning that if countries retaliate in kind, the US economy could face a severe scenario: a loss of 5.5 million jobs, unemployment rising to 7%, and a sharp decline in GDP. Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs has raised the probability of a recession to 35%, up from 20%. This trend continues to build each day. More importantly, this isn't a consequence of a global crisis. This is the direct result of domestic policies being pushed from the White House. Allies are outraged, and Wall Street is uncertain. The president of the European Commission made it clear: We have everything we need to protect our people and our prosperity. We have the largest single market in the world. We have the strength to negotiate. We have the power to push back. Meanwhile, Canada is no longer just issuing warnings. With a growing leadership role, Mark Carney is calling for protecting domestic workers while restructuring the economy to no longer depend on U.S. policies. At the same time, U.S. financial markets are in a state of high tension. The S&P 500 just experienced its worst quarter since 2022, and large corporations are drowning in uncertainty. A seasoned production director in Texas shared that after over 50 years in business, he's never seen a market this unstable. The widespread anxiety isn't just about tariff policies, it's because no one knows what's coming next. Inside the White House, chaos reigns. Less than 24 hours before the president's major policy speech, an astonishing reality remains. Even the president hasn't made a final decision. His economic advisors are presenting several options, from global tariffs to reciprocal tax models or imposing tariffs by economic bloc like the EU. But here's the problem. You can't negotiate with the entire world at once. A 20% tariff over 10 years could bring in up to $6 trillion to the budget. But that's the ideal scenario, assuming no retaliation, which economists say is inevitable. Goldman Sachs has responded by lowering GDP growth forecasts and warning of rising inflation, unemployment, and the looming risk of a widespread recession. These tariff decisions are creating instability not just domestically but on a global scale. When a policy called liberation ends up throwing the entire economy into chaos, the real question becomes, who is truly bound? Tesla is now under attack from Canada. Where is the auto war heading? Tesla is taking a major hit from Canada amid escalating trade tensions with the Trump administration. After the U.S. imposed high tariffs on Canadian goods, Ottawa struck back hard. Canada is not only imposing special tariffs on Tesla, but also removing it from its subsidy program and considering restrictions on the export of rare minerals, key materials for electric vehicles. Is this a fatal blow pushing Tesla into crisis? Or will the policy backfire, sparking an even larger trade war? The backdrop, from tariffs to hidden sanctions, shows the US-Canada trade war is no longer just about political disputes. It has escalated into a full-blown battle over technology and energy. Why is Tesla the primary target? The Canadian government didn't choose Tesla at random. There are strategic reasons. First, Tesla is the biggest symbol of US EV dominance. If Canada wants to send a strong message, it must target the most significant company. Tesla accounts for over 50% of EV sales in Canada, and tariffs will drive up prices, reducing its competitiveness. Second, Canada wants to boost domestic EV production. The country is investing heavily in local EV manufacturers including Lion Electric, VinFast, which has a plant in Canada, and partnerships with GM and Ford. Restricting Tesla creates room for Canadian brands to gain market share. Third, Elon Musk is a controversial figure in Canada. Though Musk has had conflicts with the US government, he's still seen as a symbol of American industry. By targeting Tesla, Canada is making a bold statement against Trump's trade policies while pushing back against American corporate influence. Tesla is being attacked not just as an EV maker but as an emblem of American power. But Tesla isn't the only victim. If Canada enforces these policies, the consequences won't stop there. First, North America's EV supply chain could collapse. Canada is a key supplier of lithium, cobalt, and nickel, essential for EV batteries. If Canada restricts exports, US EV production costs will skyrocket, pushing up car prices. Not just Tesla, Ford, GM, and Rivian will all suffer too. Second, Tesla risks losing a crucial market. Canada is one of Tesla's most important markets outside the US. Without subsidies and with additional tariffs, Tesla prices in Canada could rise by $5,000 to $15,000. This could drive consumers toward domestic brands, or even Chinese competitors like BYD, which is eyeing the Canadian market. Third, the US may retaliate with counter tariffs. If tensions escalate, the US could impose tariffs on Canadian cars and parts, hurting major Canadian firms like Magna International. one of the world's biggest auto suppliers. Both sides would suffer heavy losses, plunging North America's auto industry into an unprecedented trade war. Clearly, this isn't just about Tesla. It could jeopardize the entire EV industry,